So yesterday, the first discussion was on phassa. What is phassa? And we saw that if you translate phassa as contact, then it could give rise to a misunderstanding that it's a linear process. But actually, phassa is the confluence of all three things: the sense space, the sense object, and the sense consciousness. And even though the sense consciousness has the faculty or the ability to be able to be conscious of its respective sense object, it cannot do so unless the other two are there. So that's why, in practical terms, phassa means sense experience. You could say it's sense contact in the sense that there is an experience of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, sensing, or cognizing with the mind. We also talked about the difference between the popular understanding of nāma-rūpa that is defined in the context of the paticca samuppada, the law of dependent origination. And I thought there was this general idea of mind and matter that is generally understood by people, but it seems during yesterday's presentation, different people have different ideas of mind and matter. Well, in the commentary, nāma-rūpa is defined in, as you can see on the right hand side, shaded in green. Nama refers to all the four mental aggregates: feeling, sanya, saṅkhāra, and consciousness. And of course, the rupa is the same for both of them, whether it's in the commentary or in the sutta. However, in the context of paticca samuppada, nama here refers to 5 elements, 3 of which correspond with that in the commentary, but the last 2 don't. In the place of consciousness, they have phassa and attention, sense experience or sense contact and attention. The reason why this is so is in the previous link, in the law of dependent origination, vijnana or consciousness is already there. So no point putting it here again. But again, I pointed out yesterday that the links in the law of dependent origination need not necessarily have to be linear. They are related not necessarily in a linear way, but it could be simultaneous, synchronous arising of all these things. These things can only arise, for example, consciousness can only arise together with feeling and sanya, and sometimes with volition. When you say vijnana paccaya nāma-rūpa, or vijnana is a condition for nāma-rūpa, it doesn't mean that vijnana arises first, followed by nāma-rūpa. No, they arise simultaneously. There's a simile given by Ayasma Sariputta in the Samyutta Nikaya. It says that it's like 2 sheaves of grass leaning on one another. So they are interdependent and simultaneous. Now, phassa, although it is under nama, phassa, as we saw earlier, is actually a confluence of 3 things: sense base, object, and consciousness. You see that there are 2 material elements there if we are referring to the 5 senses. However, phassa itself is a mental experience. The experience of seeing is something mental, although it needs the other 2 material elements in the case of the 5 senses. In the case of the 6th sense, it could be material or it could be immaterial. It could be the objects of the 5 senses, or it could be concepts. Now, in discussion topic C, we talked about how you understood Saṅkhāra in the context of the law of dependent origination. In the law of dependent origination, so you will see that Saṅkhāra is defined as mental volitional formation, verbal volitional formation, and bodily volitional formations. But all these actually stem from the mind. And if it's expressed physically, then we call it bodily volitional formation. If it's expressed verbally, then we call it verbal volitional formation. But if it's not expressed, it's only in the mind, then it's called mental volitional formation. This constitutes the karma that can lead to rebirth. However, this does not include the bodily volitional formation that arises independent of the mind. Yesterday I gave you the example of the digestive process that's going on in the mind, talking about the immune system, and talking also about the spontaneous and natural movements that can occur during meditation when the mind and body are relaxed. In fact, there is a particular sort of qigong that is called natural qigong, where you don't have any fixed pattern, but the movement of the qigong practitioner depends on each person's physiological condition. If there is some sort of blockages in the body, then that particular person will move in his own way, according to the intelligence of the qi, not through the mind. The mind's job is only to allow that bodily volition to continue. And the volition of the mind can actually override it, as I gave you an example, which I also talked about in one of my earlier books called Dharma Therapy, where you are not supposed to move, you are supposed to sit absolutely still, and if there are any painful sensations, you focus on those sensations until they disappear. And that could also result in the healing. Whereas in the Qigong therapy, you allow the body to move of its own accord, according to the intelligence of the qi, and then that could also lead to healing. So that sort of healing is not done through the mind door, it is done through the body door. And that sort of volition is not under the Saṅkhāra of the law of dependent origination, because this is only concerned about future rebirth. In discussion 2a, we looked into Saṅkhāra in the context of the 5 aggregates. Earlier on, it was the law of dependent origination. Now is in the context of the 5 aggregates. And we saw that there are various originations for the 5 aggregates. From the Sutta, it shows you that nutriment is the origin of Rūpa. And the very moment that life takes place in the womb, in the case of human existence, then nutriment from the mother will nourish that embryo and nurture it until full maturity when birth is given and that baby comes out. From that point onwards, then it is the volition of the baby to want to take food in order to maintain and sustain the body, to continue the body. Then we go on to the next 3, Vedana, Sanya and Saṅkhāra. They all originate from sense experience or contact. If there's no sense experience, then there's no feeling, perception or Saṅkhāra. That will happen. These are all dependent on sense experience. If you're fast asleep at night and you're not conscious of what's happening at the senses, then there's no Saṅkhāra related to any of the senses. But you might have dreams. When you are in deep, dreamless sleep, then Saṅkhāra is not there. But even in dreamless sleep, according to the Abhidhamma, there is still the bhavanga, the life continuum. Because there can never be a break in the consciousness, because 2 things can happen. Either you have achieved Nirodha Samapatti, the cessation of feeling and perception, or the temporary suspension of all consciousness and mental activity, or you have reached Parinibbana, when all of the 5 aggregates are already extinguished. So even when one is in deep sleep without any dreams, according to the Abhidhamma, there is still consciousness, and this is called the life continuum or bhavanga consciousness, and the object of the consciousness is something from the past that is carried forward to this present existence. It is not something material, but it's something intangible, a concept of something that was done in the past. And then of course you have nāma-rūpa, which we talked about just now. That nāma-rūpa is the origination of vijnana, not necessarily in a linear form, but in terms of interdependence and simultaneity. Then this is the thing that most of you did not understand. How is it that in this extract it says that Saṅkhāra constructed form as form, constructed feeling as feeling, constructed sanya as sanya, constructed construction as construction, constructed consciousness as consciousness, and which I gave you some examples to show you. One of them is that the intention of wanting to participate in this workshop. That initial intention, you will construct other intentions that will lead to the construction of feeling, the construction of perception, the construction of more and more intentions, and even the construction of consciousness. Because consciousness arises together with feeling and perception. And of course, Saṅkhāra. As you can see from this extract, feeling, perception, and consciousness, these are conjoined, they are not disjoint, and they must always arise together, but not necessarily volition. As I pointed out, in the case of the four senses, there is no volition. In the case of the fifth sense, that is the body, there is volition, most of the time, and which the mind is not aware of. This is what I talked about just now. The volition does not arise in the four senses, but it arises mostly in the body sense. But the intention that arises in the body, although it still constitutes karma, because it's a cause and there will be an effect. If you're hungry and you eat food, the effect is that you will continue to nourish and maintain the body. If you stop eating food, then all the matter in your body will start to deteriorate and eventually disintegrate. So this is also karma, but this karma is only confined to the present existence. Even for non-arahants and for arahants, this is the same. The intention that occurs together with body consciousness will give effects only in this present life. It will not be carried forward to the future. So this sort of Saṅkhāra is not included in the Saṅkhāra for the law of dependent origination, but it is still Saṅkhāra in the sense of the five aggregates. In the case of the Saṅkhāra in the mind, that is the forerunner of moral actions. Whatever you think, speak, or do that comes from the mind, then there will be moral consequences, whether in this life or in future life. And now we go on to discussion topic number 3. In the first part, the question is, what is the difference between Saṅkhāra in section 3 and Saṅkhāra in sections 1 and 2? In fact, it's not even the word vipassana, it's the verb of the word vipassana, which is vipassati or vipassitabam. You see in the Pali. And in English, it is translated as, how are Saṅkhāras to be distinctly seen? Right? This distinctly seen is the verb of vipassana. So vipassana is actually distinct seeing, clear seeing. So in the context of the dependent origination, Saṅkhāra refers to volitional formations leading to rebirth only, and because the law of dependent origination starts with avijja, it is not applicable to arahants who have already extinguished or uprooted avijja. In the context of the five aggregates, Saṅkhāra or volitional formations can either lead to rebirth or not to rebirth, as I just explained just now. But in the context of vipassana, Saṅkhāra here refers to all conditioned phenomena, whether they are volitional or not. Now the first two, in the law of dependent origination and the five aggregates, although they are volitional, they are also constructed, they are also conditioned phenomena. That's why under the five aggregates section, Saṅkhāra is defined as that which constructs other things as well as itself. It also constructs itself. I also pointed out to you yesterday that your intention to join this workshop is not a free choice, it is also a product of causes and conditions. In section 3, when you're doing vipassana, Saṅkhāra refers to all things that are the products of causes and conditions, regardless of whether they are volitional or not. And second part of discussion 3 is about Saṅkhāra and Dhamma. We have active Saṅkhāra and passive Saṅkhāra. All these Saṅkhāras, whether active or passive, are products of causes and conditions. But active Saṅkhāra involves volition, whereas passive Saṅkhāra does not involve volition. I forgot to give you one more simile of a pot maker. Someone was trying to illustrate the difference between passive and active Saṅkhāra. So the potter is like active Saṅkhāra, because the potter is the one that is turning the wheel and shaping the clay to make it in the pot. And then the pot is the passive Saṅkhāra, it's a product of causes and conditions. When the pot is finally made and fired, then that passive Saṅkhāra, even though it has no volition, it can also be the cause and condition for other volitional and non-volitional active or passive Saṅkhāra. If somebody sees the pot, he goes window shopping and sees the pot and that person likes it, that is a cause for the person to have this intention of wanting to buy the pot. You see? So that passive Saṅkhāra is also the cause for an active Saṅkhāra to arise. And then this person goes to buy that, brings it home, and then makes use of it, pours water into it, and make it into a vase, and to put some flowers. So that pot now becomes also the cause for water to be contained inside there. All products of causes and conditions, also intricately interlinked, interdependent. Okay? So this is how active and passive Saṅkhāras, they are interacting all the time. I think you can see that also in your guided meditation, when you're exposed to the videos and also to the different background sounds. You will see how all these background sounds, which are actually passive Saṅkhāra, once they come into contact with you, once you have sense experience, then you see how the mind reacts differently according to the different stimuli. You can see the interaction between active and passive Saṅkhāra. Now, all of these actually come under Dhamma. So that's why in the quotations they say that all Saṅkhāras are impermanent and suffering. And then it says all Dhamma, all things are not self. I think in one of the quotations also it says that the 5 aggregates are impermanent, suffering, and not self. But another one, it didn't say about not self individually for the 5 aggregates, but it says at the end, all things are not self. So these things refer to Saṅkhāras as well as non-Saṅkhāras. Non-Saṅkhāras are things which are not products of causes and conditions. This includes the Nibbana, which is the unconditioned, and the laws of nature, for example, the 5 niyamas. All the sciences are based on the laws of nature. Because we understand the law of nature, that we can design ways to overcome certain limitations. For example, because we understand the law of gravity, because we understand the law of aerodynamics, that's why we can defy the law of gravity by making use of the law of aerodynamics. The commentary gives an example of these sort of laws of nature. One is the order of seeds. Naturally, a durian seed will only sprout a durian tree and give durian fruits. But once you understand the law of how the genes work and how they influence the DNA, then you can modify the genes and make the DNA work in such a way that it produces something else. Like for example, now they have seedless guava, or they have things that are genetically modified and the fruits are mutated. They are not what they originally were. So because you go and meddle with the laws of nature, then what happens is that when human beings eat those mutated GMO foods, then the body system cannot really handle it because it's something unnatural, it's man-made. And so that could also be a cause for a lot of diseases and illnesses, physiological problems, because you are meddling with the laws of nature. And Uttu Niyama here is the order of seasons, how the weather changes according to so many factors, so many variables, but the law is still there. The law doesn't change. The variables change, but the law doesn't change. And then Karma Niyama is the moral law of cause and effect, whereas the first two are the physical laws of cause and effect. Then Dhamma Niyama refers to natural laws regarding the nature of the mind-body process. For example, the Arahant, one who has attained liberation, will no longer be able to commit any unwholesome deeds. He will no longer be able to take rebirth. These are all cut off. This is the natural order of the Dhamma. The Sotapan, the stream enterer, who has a glimpse of Nibbana, will never again have more than 7 lifetimes, will never again be reborn in the lower realms. This is the order of the Dhamma. The order of the mind is that the mind, for example, is different from matter, different from material things. The mind has the faculty of consciousness, of being able to be aware of things, to be conscious of things. Whereas with material things, not sentient, they don't have consciousness. For example, just now I talked about how consciousness must arise together with its mental factors. They cannot be separated. There cannot be feeling, there cannot be perception without consciousness. In the simile of the cup of water, without the solvent, you put in the solute, also you cannot get a solution. The solute is just the particles of dye will not dissolve and give you a solution if there's no water in there. They must arise together with consciousness. Okay, that is the order of the mind.